This is the EFL Magazine Business Podcast number 1. Today's guest is Mie Simpson, the owner of 3 ELT schools in Mie, Japan. Ian is also a surfer and rugby coach. Ian talks about setting up his business story, and what he's learned along the way. I very much enjoyed talking to Ian, and I hope you'll enjoy listening too.
Hey everyone, buckle up for a new episode of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast, the one and only podcast made to help you launch your business or take your existing business to a level of success you could never have imagined. Whether you're a school owner, freelancer, publisher, or other entrepreneur, you're sure to pick up lots of actionable advice when you listen to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. Remember to visit eflmagazine.com for great articles and features. Without further ado, here's your host, the founder of EFL Magazine, Philip Pound.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first ever EFL Magazine Business Podcast. And today it's my great pleasure to introduce Mie Simpson to you. Ian, how are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you, Philip. And thank you for inviting me onto your very first show.
I couldn't think of a better person to start with than you, Ian, because you're a seasoned podcaster. So besides your schoolwork, which we'll get into, and your entrepreneurship, tell me a little bit about your podcasting. You have a few podcasts on the go?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the last time we spoke, we were on other sides of the table, I think, weren't we? I was interviewing you for, I had a podcast called Tokyo Real Podcast, which was educationally based and entrepreneur based in the beginning. And that sort of morphed into the Active Podcast, which was a more general type of podcast to do with education and high performance sporting people. So that's still running. Then I've got a Coffee and Chat English podcast where there's 48 topics uploaded. Each one lasts about 15 minutes, and I talk about the topic, and people can download related worksheets to go with it and use in their classes. So that's pretty cool. And then my new baby is the Big Wave Surfing Podcast, where I interview a lot of the top big wave surfers in the world and dive deep into their consciousness and their minds and find out what makes them tick and how they survive in 80-foot waves. So those are the 3 podcasts I have running at the moment.
Wow, you're a busy man.
Yeah, it's as you say, a labor of love. It's good fun, and it's nice talking to these people. Every time you talk to somebody, you learn something new. That's the great thing about podcasts.
Actually, on the subject of podcasts as a business tool.
Well, it depends. What your purpose for doing it for is. For example, most people just start off because they enjoy doing it and they want to talk about a particular topic or whatever. And that's what happened with my Big Wave Surfing Podcast. I started off just doing it for the love of it. And then a company approached me, Blue Soup Equipment Company. They sell these inflation up vests for big wave surfers, and said, well, you have direct contact to all the big wave surfers, so can we sponsor you? So I got a sponsor like that. So straight away, I sort of monetized the podcast, and that was stage 1. Now, that's the simple way of doing it, is to bring on sponsors who pay money or give products in order to monetize the product, to pay for it. And that's the way people normally do it. And the extension of that is how I started the Tokyo Real podcast. I came from London Real, and London Real started off as a podcast, and then they evolved it into having like a business accelerator course and a mastermind class and all kinds of add-ons that people paid for. So it became like a business accelerator or educational accelerator platform, which evolved from the podcast with all these add-ons that people paid extra for. So that's a way that you can sort of create and develop the podcast if you wanted to.
Okay, and a podcast for students. Can you tell
Yeah,
me a
well,
little bit about
the way I
that?
work that the podcast itself is free, so it's on Apple and Spotify, Stitcher, and the main platforms. Plus, it's on my website, and that's all free. And then on the podcast, I advertise if you want the 48 topics booklet to go with the podcast, which is all prepared with the vocabulary and all the questions and the pictures. Just go to this link, pay $9.99 US and download it, and you can, do what you want with it. So I give the podcast free and then sell products off the podcast.
Oh, I see. And can you give me the link there? We'll put it in the show notes. There you go. There's I'm being very podcasty already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please,
I'll send you the links later. Actually, it's the website is activeenglishnow.com, but I'll send you the links later. Perhaps you can put them in. I'd be grateful.
Yeah, definitely will. Okay, so so let's just go back a little bit about you, Ian. Tell me, how long have you been? You're living in Japan now. I've not given any background to you, but where are you living? Where are you from originally? How did you get to Japan?
Yeah, 20 years in Japan now. So let me take you back to the beginning. I was born near London, in a place called Reading. Moved to Wales when I was 9 and grew up in a beautiful place, Swansea, on the Gower Peninsula, which was one of the it was the first place to be designated a place of outstanding natural beauty in the country. So I grew up on the Gower in Wales and started surfing. Went to university in Cardiff University in Wales, which was a specialist physical education university. And then on the day I left university, I got a job teaching physical education in a high school in Wales. Stayed there for 17 years as a high school teacher. And then towards the end of that time, I started coaching semi-professional rugby because I'd played rugby all my life since 9 years old. And then I started, rugby had just turned professional, and there were opportunities in Japan to come here and coach rugby for big money, because rugby in Japan was always professional because it was company based. So you had the company workers earning a salary who played for the company team. So basically they were getting paid to play rugby. They didn't do much work in the factory. They mainly played rugby, but they were employed by the company. So it was always professional. So they had money. So my mate who was here said, hey, why don't you come over to Japan and coach professional rugby? Because I was well qualified to do that. And I was a bit burned out after almost 20 years of being a high school teacher in the UK. At some point, I felt like I was more like a policeman. It was a tough school. I was in a tough high school in the Welsh Valleys. So I was burned out. I thought, a few things happened in my private life, and then I was burned out. I thought, time to get on a plane and go and do something different. And I ended up in Japan as a professional rugby coach initially.
So how long were you a professional rugby coach, and how did you get into, English language teaching?
Yeah, about the first 5 years, I was coaching, started off in Tokyo at Aoyama Gakuen Daigaku.
Oh, okay.
And then I was doing some work with Honda Heat down here. I was moving around a lot, like what they call a spot coach, moving around a lot, coaching in different places. And then I ended up in Honda, which is Suzuka, which is Mie, and based myself down here. But what happened was, it's a bit like being like a professional soccer manager. You have a good few years, 2 or 3 years, and then if the results start going wrong, they normally fire the manager, or they have a clean out. A new boss comes in and he has a clean out, gets new players in, gets new coaches, and that's the way it is. It's a sort of cycle. So you end up moving all around the country. And I found a nice Japanese lady, got married, and the kids were coming. So I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. So I thought, well, let's go back to what I've always done, education, and open an English school. Because I looked at the people who were running English schools around me and thought, well, actually, they have no qualifications. They're just foreigners who've ended up in Japan and can't do anything else. Open an English. So I'm damn sure I can do it better than them. So that's why I started to open an English school. the rugby became more like part-time locally, and the English school started to, I developed that and grew that from that point on, so I could stay with the family.
Okay, so your background, you're as you say, you were 17 years a PE teacher. I mean, that's did that prepare you for entrepreneurship? Did you always have a kind of an entrepreneurial sense, bug, or I mean, where did that come from?
I always had the entrepreneurial spirit, but to answer your question, no. Because once I started an English school here in Japan, I realized that I knew nothing about business. I was a teacher. And that was the biggest shock to me, probably, that I now had to run a business as well as teach. And I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't prepared for it. And that's when I started doing a lot of self-study and reading a lot of books. And my first school was in collaboration with a Juku, and they invited me to use the second floor and open an Eikaiwa school. So luckily, they had experience in Japanese business, in the educational business in particular, of course. And so I got a lot of advice and learned a lot from them in the first few years. And steadily learned more and more about doing business in Japan. But it was a long process, and I'm still learning every day now.
And the process came, so was it a sudden flash of inspiration, say, okay, I want to start a business, and then you say, okay, what's the first step?
Well, the way it worked for me was I in that transitional period, I was working in a junior high school in Japan, and like most teachers will know, you only have about 2 or 3 lessons a day, but they make you stay there from 8:30 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night. So I had a lot of downtime. So I spent a lot of that downtime studying Japanese. And then I decided, I'm going to open my own school. So for about 6 months, I just sat at my desk when I wasn't teaching and planned every single detail of how I was going to start the school, organize the school, run the school. I visualized what it was going to look like. I started to study about what my competitive advantage would be, about strategy. So I had about 6 months to plan it in detail before I even opened it. And I think that was a massive benefit to have thought it through thoroughly before actually opening the doors.
So it sounds like your rugby coaching really came into play.
Yeah, because methodical and breaking it down into components and units. So I mean, having always been a teacher, that's the way I think analytically. In the rugby field, I was an analyst primarily. So I developed a lot of analytical systems for live analysis in rugby. One of the pioneers of that, which I've actually brought into education. I'll talk to you more about that later. And
sure.
I had that sort of an analytical brain where I guess I'm not very smart, so I need to make things simple for myself. I need to compartmentalize them and make them simple so I can see them very clearly, because that's the way I've always worked. So that's what I did.
Okay. And what was the driving force? So you wanted to become an entrepreneur, you wanted to start something. So what's the motivation to?
The motivation for me was I don't take orders very well. I don't like working for people, especially in Japan. People get promoted in Japan by seniority age. So you have a lot of idiots above you telling you what to do. And I just couldn't hack that. So I thought, geez, I can't do this for the next 20 years. So yes, my main motivation for doing it was to be my own boss and to manage my own time. I think, time is the number one thing. If you can manage your own schedule and manage your own time, that's more important than money in a way, time, to be honest. Especially as you get older, you realize that time is more important.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit. So you start your company, you have your motivation, and where do you get the money from? Do you think starting a company you need a lot of money at the beginning? How do you manage that? That's sometimes for people starting business, they seem to think they need a lot of funding and
Yeah.
behind them. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, first advice is don't do it the way I did it. Because actually, when I came from the UK, I had racked up a lot of credit card debt in the UK with personal marriage reasons, and one thing and another, and lost money on property because there was a crash. And I came with a lot of debt, cut long story short, a lot of debt. And so when I started my business, I started probably with about, I don't know, like £15,000 debt. And it took me the first 3 years to pay off my debt before I even started making any profit.
Wow.
But I didn't have kids at that time, and I didn't have a wife. So it was in that transitional period. So for me, there was no risk. It didn't matter if I succeeded or failed. Therefore I felt no pressure. And that was, so when people say, oh, you took a big risk to leave a solid job in the UK, come to here, and then I worked as a rugby coach, but that was never going to be my long-term career. And then to start a business with a £15,000 debt in the UK and spend 3 years paying off, I never looked at it like that. I just thought, well, that's just the way it is. I don't have kids, I don't have a wife. To me, it's no risk. I'll start it off and I'll do that. But of course, the ideal way to do it would be to have some funding in place before you open your business. But the key point there, I guess, is that if I was able to do it, so it proves the point that you don't have to have funding in place. It just makes it easier if you have funding in place. But if you don't know what you're doing with that funding, you can burn through that money and waste it and be back to square one again anyway. The way I did it, I could not make a mistake. I had to get it right because it was sink or swim. So sometimes when you challenge yourself and put yourself under pressure, you bring out the best in yourself.
Wow. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a quite amazing story, that for people who maybe think, oh, I don't have the money, that you were, minus 15,000 to begin with. Did you find that you'd say you'd come from the UK and you had to, this amount of debt, but obviously the attitude to debt in Japan is very different, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but of course, nobody knew I had £15,000. So, I was just living sort of hand to mouth and making things work. I think my girlfriend bought me my first computer as a present because I didn't have a computer for the office. And I lived upstairs in this juku, and I had one classroom, and on the left of it, the door led into like a diner kitchen and a tiny shower. And on the other side of it led into a tiny tatami room bedroom. And that was my first school. And then if you look at that school a few years later, all the rooms had been knocked into classrooms. And I had moved out to another apartment. So we just expanded very slowly, room by room, until the second floor was then a school, and I had to move out to another apartment. So it was just a step-by-step process, not trying to run before you can walk. I mean, there's two ways of doing it. Some people come to Japan and they come with money, they come with funding, and they are business people, and they have an objective of, they know before they come, they're going to create an English school business, and they're going to roll it out, and they know exactly what they're doing, what they're going to go. But most of us, to be honest, don't have the luxury of doing that. So we have to claw our way from point zero up through the industry, developing your business as you go along. That's how most of us in reality have to do it.
So you had a background, obviously, knowing you, Ian, you're quite outgoing guy, and you have a background in coaching and, dealing with people. But, there may be some people out there that think of starting a school or other enterprise in ELT, and maybe they're not so outgoing and maybe a little bit more introverted. what advice? I mean, you have background of dealing with all kind of personalities on the rugby field, rugby pitch, rugby field. So, I mean, what advice would you give to people who are maybe, a little bit shyer, or, come maybe more from academic kind of background? Can you?
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, if you're going to start your own business, you have to be a certain kind of person. So it's not for everyone. So I wouldn't say to everyone, if you have a big fear of risk and failure, if you are not particularly innovative or creative thinking, if you would just rather earn a monthly salary and work in a Eikaiwa school or a public school in Japan, that might be the best way for you to go. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. That's what some people want to do. But if you want to take the step and open a business, then you do have to have a certain mindset, which is, number one, you have to have self-confidence. You have to believe that you can do it. Because if you believe you can't do it, then you won't do it. You'll fail. You have to believe you can do it. You have to have a brain that is innovative and creative to a certain extent. And you have to take responsibility for the actions that you take, be them good or bad. And when you take risk, it has to be calculated risk. Everybody has a fear of risk. Nobody doesn't fear failure. We all do. But if it's calculated and logical, then normally you can reassure yourself that things will be okay. So I think those qualities are really important for someone who's going to open a business. And perseverance. Perseverance is probably the most successful, the most important word in success. Because if you develop something that's of sound quality, then if you persevere with it over a number of years, it eventually will be successful. But many people give up too soon. 3 foot from gold,
Yeah. And so we touched a little bit on entrepreneurship there, Ian. Thank you for that. I just wanted to kind of dig down a little bit more about the everyday running of a business. So, how many students you need to break even, how much you think you should spend on advertising, how you should, maybe I'm asking too many questions here, but I'll try to keep it simple. So tell me about the day-to-day difficulties you had when you were starting out, let's say in accounts, getting students.
Yeah. Well, the point I would make is that you are only as good as the people that you have around you. And that's the same in rugby as well. I was also an international level surfing coach as well. And it's the same thing, whether you're coaching a surfing team, a rugby team, or a business team. You're only as good as the people you have around you. So I really strongly suggest people that they put a good team in place. That's the first thing. Partnerships, well, partnerships in my experience normally end in tears. So yeah, I'm not a big one on partnerships because I see very few that succeed. Collaborations are good. Now, the difference between a partnership and a collaboration is you can break it anytime and get divorced and go your own way, right? But contractual partnerships normally end in tears and end up with misery for everyone. I found. So initially I was lucky because I had half a good team around me who already existed in the Juku below where I started my school. We had a lady there who was very good at marketing. So when we had trial lessons, she was very good at talking to the mothers and getting the kids to sign up and getting money out of their pockets. So to have a person who knows how Japanese people think from a marketing viewpoint is very important. If you don't, and most of us foreigners don't. So you not need a Japanese person who is very good at doing that. And it's very hard to find those people because most Japanese people don't like picking up the phone and calling people and chasing people down. You know what it's like.
Sure.
They'd rather send an email or wait for the person to reply. And you need someone in your business who's going to be a bit proactive and aggressive in a nice kind of way, business-wise aggressive, to go out and get those students. Also, the teachers you employ are super, super important. If you employ bad teachers, you have a bad school, and that's bottom line. And that's always been one of the most important things in my school. I've managed to retain my good teachers for quite a few years. We've had some teachers been with us almost 10 years, other teachers 4, 5, 6 years, so that has been a big point as to why my business has continued to be sustainable and successful, because now we're in, how many years we're in? I think 16, 17 years now, so most businesses, 9 out of 10 businesses fail out after 10 years, was it 5 years, and the rest after 10 years. So to still be going at 17 years and have grown, I feel that's been quite successful. And a lot of that has been down to the staff that I've employed and managed to keep. And when I've had to replace them, I replaced them with good teachers. So that's one thing I would stress, is surround yourself with good people. And I always use that adage, if you're the smartest person in your business, you have a problem. So surround yourself with smart people who can help you get to where you want to go. And especially if you're a foreign owner, you need smart Japanese people around you as well. Because there's this cultural difference where we just don't get it, right? We don't understand what they're thinking, and they don't understand what we are thinking. And there's nothing straight, not saying anything bad about that. It's just a cultural difference between us, and you need good Japanese people to help you get into the minds of the Japanese customer quite often.
So you touched on something really interesting there, Ian, and this is a problem that some business owners may have, or some people who are thinking about starting a school or an enterprise in the future may have, is what do you look for when you're hiring new teachers, and how do you retain existing teachers? So you've obviously been successful. So can you?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I look for 3 qualities: personality, honesty, and reliability. And I used to be of the mind, well, if they're an experienced teacher, if they're a licensed teacher, that's going to be better. But I've found that it's not necessarily the case, because people who I was myself, I came here as a licensed, an experienced high school teacher from the UK of 20 years. And the way I try to teach here didn't work. It's just it's a completely different scenario. So I like to get people with a good personality, people who are honest and who are reliable. That's a really important quality, reliability. And then I can mold them into the way that I want them to be and the way that I want them to teach in my school. So we have a set pattern as to how I want them to teach, a system, but there's flexibility within that system where they can inject their own personality into the classroom lesson. And then once they're teaching the way that you want them to teach, and they're turning up for classes on time because they're reliable, they're honest, so you can rely on them, to if there's money lying around, they're not going to take it, and they have a good personality, so everyone likes them. Those are 3 really important things, because a lot of mothers, when they bring kids, or even adults when they come to a school, they join a school because they like the teacher. Right? Of course, they read the website, they read all the academic bump, but if they like the teacher, they're going to join and they're going to stay. It's a quite low level way of thinking, isn't it? But it's true. It's true, So teachers, having good teachers is really important, and then keeping them. Well, you just, you treat them as you want to be treated. So I respect my teachers, create a professional but friendly environment with the school, look after them, communicate with them, and give them what they want as much as you can to keep them happy, while keeping the system running smoothly. So just, you got to treat them well. And a lot of, again, I don't want to be too critical, but I can say what I want, can't I? I mean, a lot of Japanese companies don't treat people well, you know, and if you treat people well, they'll work hard for you, because they're not driven. They're not necessarily, good people are not necessarily driven by money. They're driven by feeling valued, feeling wanted is far more important than just giving them extra money. That's not going to make them work harder. Creating a culture within your school that is rich in friendliness and positivity and professionalism and praise is far more important than just giving them more money.
Here's another way of looking at it. What's a good marketing tip? Hire a good teacher.
Yeah. As I said, you're only as good as the teachers you got in your school. You know? Even if you're the best teacher and your teachers are not good, then you're not going to have a good school. You got to get good teachers. And if Philip, to be honest with you, you ask every school owner, the biggest headache all of us have is staffing. I've been really lucky, as I just mentioned to you. I've always had good. I had 2 bad teachers in my whole in all the time I've been doing it so far, in almost 20 years. 2 bad teachers, but I got rid of them really quickly. I realized within 2 weeks they were not who I thought they were, and boom, they were gone. I picked up the phone to my sister in the UK on one occasion. She just retired. She's same as me, high school physical education teacher in the UK. I said, "You just retired, Karen, haven't you?" I said, "Yeah, I just fired my teacher. She was crap. Get on the plane and come over." So she did. She stayed here 6 months until I found another good teacher.
Wow.
So yeah, hire slowly and fire quick.
And tell me, for people who want to learn from, the experience of others, tell me, what are some red flags you would see if you're going to interview a teacher? What, in, let's say, mannerism, in what they say, what doesn't sound right? What do you think could cause problems down the line? How would you know that?
Well, firstly is initial appearance, the way that they show up, their initial body language and verbal language to me, and then things like overconfidence. Overconfidence. I've had a few teachers like that, and they just think they're so much better than they are. That relates to problems. People who don't listen, and then people who become lone cowboys, and they just want to go and teach lessons the way that they want to teach them, because that's the way they've always taught them, and I'm going to do it my way. You don't need people like that. And for me, it's a gut feeling. I can be with somebody for a short period of time and think this person is right, or this person is wrong. So yeah, overconfidence, don't listen, want to be a lone ranger, go out and do it their own way. Those are big red flags for me. And Philip, one of the things I've found is Skype interviews, online interviews. Oh my God. I mean, I thought I had a good gut feeling, but I have got it wrong twice. And they were both Skype interviews. Those people managed to convince me that they were someone they would. And my sister, because I got her on the call as well, because I said she's an experienced teacher. I said, come in and give me your opinion on it. We both got it wrong. I'm thinking, geez, it's so hard online to know who the person really is. So be careful if you're out there and you're interviewing online, because it's really difficult. So face to face is so much better. But now we're in a time where it's very difficult, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, that is a problem. I mean, that being the case, and you've given me some of your experiences online. Is there any tips you can give to online interviewing? Is there anything you learned, considering the
well, what I do, obviously I don't only have one interview. I have a series of interviews, and I slowly, even from obviously interview one is a little bit formal because you don't know each other, but I gradually get them to let their guard down and make them feel very comfortable, and then the real person comes out usually. That's what I've learned. You know, throw them a bit of rope and see how far they'll take it. And then you can see a lot deeper as to what they're really like on the inside, what the real person is. If you throw them a bit of rope, let their barriers down, allow them to relax, yeah, that's all I can advise. Really, it's tough. You know? But if they turn up and they're not good, get rid of them quickly.
And Ian, turning to your business, how many schools have you got now? Or tell me a little bit more about that.
At the moment, I have 3. I had 5 at one time.
Wow.
But I've got 3. That's a sort of a little story on its own, really, a business story. So at the moment, I've got my main school. I've got a smaller kids school in a city about 30 minutes away. And then I've got a new active English school where we teach English through human movement, which includes a complex of 2 gymnasia and classrooms, office, and a rehabilitation room. And there's another lady that does her rehabilitation, lomi massage out of our building. So we get money from that as well. So that's my new baby, is the active English school. And that's quite an interesting project that I've started. I've been pioneering active English. So to go back, stay on your question, three schools at the moment. I had 2 others, but from a business point of view, this is important for people to realize. When a school becomes unsustainable, don't flog it to death. You got to know when to pull the plug on it. And the first school, I sort of inherited it from somebody, and it was in an area where the population was dropping, the young kids were growing up and moving away. So you look at the demographics and you think, this is never going to work. Pull the plug on it. So that one went. Then Nova crashed. Remember Nova?
I do.
Yeah. And somebody came to me and said, look, we got like 50 odd students from Nova. Will you open a school? Because Nova's closed. Will you open a school near Nova? And one of the rich ladies said, my husband has an office building and there's the 4th floor is free. You can have it free of charge. Wow. So I said, yeah, let's do it. So we opened a school there, which ran for about 2 years and mainly full of rich housewives. And eventually they started to drift away. And the woman who owned the building was saying, well, we've got to keep it going. It's the Japanese way. You cannot quit. I said, well, we're losing money. We're losing money. We've got to keep it going. You cannot shut it down. So I said, stuff that. End of next month, I'm out of here. And I made sure that all the students had somewhere else to go. I set them up with other teachers or other schools, so I didn't leave them high and dry, and pulled the plug on that and walked away from that one. So I'm down to 3 now, but they're all sustainable. They're all healthy. You know, they don't make me super rich, Philip, to be honest. But they put food on the table for my family. It's a comfortable living. I'm not going to get super rich from doing this, but I'm happy, you know. So, and I've got time. I can go surfing when I want. I've got good staff who will run the lessons for me while I'm in the water surfing. And as I first said, time is more important than money, you know. So yeah, 3 schools at the moment.
And you touched on something really interesting there, which was how to cut your losses. I mean, whether it's a sunk cost fallacy or, you know, sometimes we're in a situation, we're stuck. We think, you know, should I quit now? Should I cut my losses? Am I giving up? As you mentioned earlier, am I 3 feet from gold? Or so. For you, it sounds like you made that decision quite easily because, you know, you were losing money and that's it, and you cut your losses.
Yeah, it's not only that. Yeah. You're losing money, but you look at the whole business picture and think, well, I could change this or I could change that, but is the end result going to be much different? And you come to a conclusion that it isn't. So therefore, despite what anyone says around you, you pull the plug on it and you get away. And that's not a failure. That's just a good business decision. Because then you might just look at it as a pivot. You go somewhere else. You go to a new location where there's a new danchi, you know, housing estate with lots of young families, with young kids, and you start a new school. That's just
Mm-hmm.
a good business decision.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends how you look at failure, doesn't it? Because Japanese look at failure just the way you said, or you're running away, you failed. No, I didn't. I just
Exactly.
made a
Yeah.
good business decision.
Mm.
And I'm sorry about that you can't have English lessons with me anymore, but you can come to my new school if you want.
Mm. And tell me a little bit about the students you have at the moment. I mean, how does it break down? Do you have like what we say, kids, business people, general English, exam preparation? What's your main focus?
Yeah, our strategy is to focus on kids. We have a strong cohort of kids in our schools, and the adult side of it, we do focus our strategy there is to focus on high-end business professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So man-to-man, one-to-one lessons combined with online lessons for busy people. I have this proprietary um, um, lesson analysis software system that actually I brought from rugby. I told you
Mm-hmm.
I was an analyst in rugby. I used to do a lot of the analysis for rugby, and we had this online system where you analyze live what's going on the rugby field. Well, I woke up one day and thought, hey, I can use that in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did, I've adapted the analysis software. So if I was talking to you on a Zoom call, every time you make a mistake, I'm using my keyboard to analyze and create 14-second video clip highlights of mistakes that you make, or good points that you make. And at the end of the lesson, I will send you I will condense a 50-minute lesson down into a 3 to 4 minute highlight video for you that you can review with on-screen captions, feeding back on all your mistakes and your good points. So now busy business people kind of like that, because like the shachos, the doctors, they're busy people and they don't always have time to drive across town to come to your school. So they say, okay, I can't come today, and is it okay if I jump online? Yeah, sure, just jump online. We'll do the lesson online. So that's our sort of focus on the adults, is high-end business professionals. For the other reason is that they never complain about paying the lesson fee, right?
Mm.
Because they're professionals and they know if they want a quality product, they have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas cheap people always complain about paying a cheap orgasha, really cheap, and you want it even cheaper. So that's why, plus this area here, again, it's a business decision. We are very close to the Mie University Hospital, which has a lot of medical professionals living in the area. So it's a logical business decision to target those. So we focus on those two areas, kids and high-end business professionals.
And retaining students.
Yeah, retaining students, vitally important. And again, a lot of that comes down to your office staff. It means that your office staff must be having continual good communication with the mothers, and good marketing about what new courses we're introducing, what's coming up next year, how your kids are going to benefit from that. So you're always communicating with the mothers about the importance of staying in the system for the kids' education. And the other thing we do is, most mothers never know what goes on in a classroom. So using this analysis system that I have, we take the video camera into the classroom, and once or twice a month, we make a 1 minute or less than 1 minute video of what's going on in the classroom. And on my system, we upload it to the mothers who are all on the system. And then they can see also their kid in the classroom speaking English. They can see them progressing year after year. So that's good feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps to keep them in the loop as to what's going on. So our kids' retention rate is probably about 90%. I think. Yeah, I mean, you get your okanenses, the grade sixes from elementary school. They graduate. When they go to junior high school, we try and keep as many of those as we can into junior high school classes. But most of the students we lose are grade 5 and 6 students whose mothers, there's this thing in Japan where mothers think when they get to 5 and 6, they've got to go off to Juku to study for the Juken test, the entrance test for the school. And so if you're going to lose them, you normally lose them in 5 or 6, the kids. So we try and keep them, but most of our losses are from that age group. Yeah. Otherwise, we manage to keep them. A lot, and that goes back to all the things I've said. It comes back to good communication from my office staff, having good teachers that the kids like, running a professional system where the figurehead, me, is seen as being professional, and he's an ex from the UK, ex-professional licensed teacher. It all gives credibility to what you do. So you build up trust over a period of years, and then people stay with you.
And tips on dealing with parents, Ian?
Yeah, I'm not the most diplomatic, actually. But again, a lot of that I leave to my Japanese office staff, and they're very good at it. If we get difficult, if we get monster mothers, I just come in and I tell them straight whatever I need to tell them, and I don't care. I don't care what they think. I don't care if I know I'm right, so I believe I'm right. It's my opinion. It's my school, so I'll run it the way I want. And if you don't want to be here, you can go somewhere else. So I just tell them straight, to be honest. But that's only at the last resort. I try and leave it to my staff to be more diplomatic. Yeah.
Okay, and tell me a little bit about you touched on tracking progress. Tell me a little bit about that. You mentioned videos. How can students measure their progress, because that's very important, isn't it, for retaining and students?
It is, yeah. We 3 ways. We use video analysis, as I said, so we provide regular feedback to the mothers via video. Also, I do it old school in a way. They do the teachers do once a term handwritten reports with the spider graph, linked with a spider graph, just showing feedback from the mothers in all aspects of what they've been studying in language. And of course we do the Aiken Junior test. So all kids are submitted for the Jido Aiken Junior test. So mothers, you see they see their kids progressing through bronze, silver, gold every year. So they see the progression, they get regular termly reports, and they get video feedback. So, it's strange. A lot of mothers are very interested in their kids' other education, and a lot of other mothers couldn't care less, as long as my kid goes to a Kaiwa school, that's okay. You get a lot of that. So we have to assume as school owners that all mothers and parents are interested in what their kids are learning. But to be honest, a lot aren't. As long as they're at the school, it's quite sad, really. But as a professional school, you assume that they are all interested, and you give quality feedback.
So it's very important to set expectations or no expectations.
Well, to set expectations, every kid is different, aren't they? So it's in a way the Aiken Junior test sort of is their target. They want to get from bronze to silver to gold to the Aiken to the next level. So that in a way is your goal. That's the expectations. That's what we show the mothers in the trial lessons. This is the process they're going to go through. This is where they'll start, and this is where they'll end up. And we can show them video of them progressing, every year. So there's nothing more important than actually seeing your kid going from not being able to speak to be able to speak. And a lot of the kids won't speak when they go home. So the mothers don't know that the kids can speak English because they won't speak in their house. So you have to find a way of getting them to speak in front of the mothers so that the mothers know that they can speak. So you have to stage that sometimes,
And moving on a little bit to, let's say, more current events and COVID and online teaching. In the past in Japan, I think there was the uptake of online teaching. It wasn't so popular, maybe lagging behind other countries in popularity. But of course, COVID has forced us all to relook our way of working and living. So how has it changed for you? Have you seen much migration to online teaching or?
Well, no, because again, this is a big business point, is that I'm in Mie Ken, which is people call country, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're right near, we're in Sioux City, we're 40 minutes from Nagoya. So it's not what I call country, but it's not like where you live in Tokyo or in a city like Osaka. So there's a big difference between doing this business, Eikaiwa, in a big city and doing it in the countryside. COVID related, we haven't been affected that much. Initially, we were shut down for 3 weeks, was it, or a month or so back, April last year. But since then, we haven't been affected much. I mean, I'm set up for video, as you know. We tried doing video lessons, but do you know, to be honest, they weren't very successful, if I'm honest. Not many kids joined them. At first, it was a steep learning curve to get the teachers set up to try and teach online. For the kids, yeah. Adults, no problem. They just switch online. Adults, easy. But for the kids, it was a bit of a steep learning curve, a bit of a nightmare. It didn't work very well, to be honest. And luckily, we only had to do it for a few weeks. And since then, I've escaped most of it, and we've been running normal classroom classes ever since.
And tell me a little bit. So I didn't actually ask you about your name of your school URL. If you could please go through that for me. I know you Queen's English, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the actual we're a limited company in Japan. So Kabushi Gaisha. So we are the limited company name is Queen's Education Limited. But we trade as Queen's English School. And also Active English. So the URL, the active one is activeenglishnow.com, and the other one is my main school is queens-e.net. Yeah, so people can find us there. Yeah.
And what are your plans for the future? Where do you see your business going? Are you happy enough with 3 schools? Will you go back to 5? What's your medium-term, long-term plan?
Well, my Active English School, we're looking at expansion there, because I'm pioneering Active English in Japan, and I see that as really important. So the Active English School, we're currently working in collaboration with Maple Leaf Publishing, Kenny King. I mean, you might know Kenny. So we're setting up a course, currently producing it, of a 1-year course of 48 active English lessons using Maple Leaf music resources, a lot of their lesson ideas combined with our active English drills. So there'll be a video package, there'll be all a resource package that people can buy, a turnkey course ready to go for people who want to do active English in their schools, either as a main course or as part of their normal lessons. So that's a whole nother podcast to talk about that. But that side of my business, yes, driving it forward, looking to expand it. My other 2 schools, which are standard Eikaiwa schools, you know, Philip, we get to a point, I find, in business where when you have like 200 plus students and you have 2 or 3 schools, there's a tipping point, right? And you think, if I go bigger, everything goes bigger. Overheads go bigger. There's more, you need more staffing, you need more funding, you need more buildings, and that creates a lot of problems in itself. So you get to a point, when you get to that tipping point, you have to decide, do I go to the next step, or am I happy with my lot? And me, I'm happy. I've decided, basically, I'm happy with my lot. I've got 2 good, solid English schools with good staff, and the active English school that I'm driving forward, and I'm happy with that. So I don't want, educationally, I don't want to go any bigger than that, because you get into a whole new realm of business and implications. So unless you're ready to dive into that deep pool, be happy with your lot, That's me.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to end it today. Our very first podcast, and I was delighted to interview Ian Simpson, and I hope you've got some good tips from Ian, some things that will work in your business. And Ian, what's a good way to contact you? I mean, you're online, I presume, like all the usual Twitter and
Facebook. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, or people can contact me via you or by my private email, which is ian@queens-e.net.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to give advice to anyone, help anyone who's starting out, because I don't know all the answers, but I made a lot of mistakes, so I can help people not to make the same mistakes as me. So, yeah, I'm willing to help. I'd love to help if anyone needs it. And if anyone wants to help me, please contact me.
Me too. So we'll put all those in the show notes. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And see you next time on the EFL Magazine Business Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast with Philip Pound. For more great advice and resources, check out eflmagazine.com. If you found this podcast helpful, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. See you next time.